Taoiseach, I want to raise a significant and very serious legacy issue that affects the state and in many ways informs how we still approach victims of sexual abuse. And in the last number of weeks we've had very significant coverage of the mother and baby home scandal and the way single women were treated and the absence of any humane response to it, and rightly so. Yet at the very same time we have this outrage, right now the state is behaving, in my view, in an appalling manner with those who were victims of child sexual abuse in primary schools and who have not had any significant or any redress at all. It's quite shocking what many of these victims have gone through. And I've met now on a number of occasions, and I can name the individual here, John Allen, who was sexually abused by a Christian brother. He is 17 years trying to seek justice. He's living in a council house. His parents are in care. He is in very difficult financial circumstances. He has a chronic disease. He's had huge anxiety and trauma as a result of this. He's been dragged through the courts. There are many other victims as well. Deputy O'D raised this in terms of about 15 victims in a similar situation that have come to him about this. Now, I raised this in October last, Taoiseach, with you. And in my view, the state fought against culpability for a long time on this one. And Louise O'Keeffe had a major breakthrough in the European Court of Human Rights in 2014. And I do this in a non-political way because all previous governments are culpable in terms of fighting that up to 2014. But it's since 2014 and a bogus interpretation and application of the Louise O'Keeffe judgment to the victims. It is just shocking, Taoiseach. This idea, for example, of prior complaint. How in the name of God is a child supposed to know that someone complained to a school manager about an abuser? How are they supposed to know that? And that's the litmus test for access to the redress scheme. It's cynical beyond belief. And likewise, it's clearly designed. It's already up and it is designed to limit accessibility to this scheme, Taoiseach. And many of the victims are in very poor financial state. Some have suicidal ideation because of the trauma that has been visited upon them. They've been to the Supreme Court and back, to the High Court and back. They can't get redress anymore in our courts, notwithstanding the European Court of Human Rights. I've met with Professor Conor O'Mahony of the UCC Child Law Clinic to go through this with him. They're now preparing a case, Taoiseach, to go back to the European Court of Human Rights. Now, we have all the outrage of 2 weeks ago, but this is all going on under our noses, Taoiseach. And the government is resisting a proper, humane response. Are we seriously saying to these victims, notwithstanding the breakthrough judgment of Louise O'Keeffe, that they will now again have to go back to the European Court of Human Rights to get proper application of that judgment? I would put it to you, Taoiseach, that the state needs to engage very quickly and very proactively on this and stop adding insult to injury to victims of child sexual abuse in our primary schools.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Every generation seems to carry with it its own set of scandals. Now, I believe, and I met Louise O'Keeffe and admired her courage in making the breakthrough in the case that she made and the years that she fought for that. And Minister O'Sullivan, when she was Minister for Education, was dealing with this when the outcome eventually occurred. I think the state have been cautious, to put it mildly, about this. What you're talking about now is, in the language you're using here, is not just about those who have come forward who were sexually abused in primary schools, but you are talking about looking at all the generations who went through primary schools, some of whom might certainly not have understood the nature of sexual abuse or whatever. But it seems to me as if what you're saying, Deputy Martin, that we should go beyond just the cases that have been mentioned by you and one that was mentioned by Deputy O'D. I have no idea how many thousands of cases may come forward with views that they were sexually abused or not in the primary school system, which has been up and running since before the foundation of the state and long before that. So if you're asking me that we reflect carefully on the preparation of a further case going back to the European Court, that's one thing. If you're now asking me to comment upon the possibility of an enormous scale of sexual abuse over 100 years in the primary school system, then if that's not what you're asking me, well then that's a different matter. But the language of what you've been referring to has been that people in the primary school system are being abused right under our noses. Then, if you're referring to the particular cases where sexual abuse that we know was involved, then that's a different matter. No, but you're talking about the primary school system. There are others out there who have claimed sexual abuse. There are some people on the other side of the argument who have had allegations of sexual abuse against them who are not guilty. This, as you know, is an enormously complex personal set of tragedies and circumstances. Now, I think when you raise an issue like this, with the possibility that it could be very, very broad indeed, and you mentioned the primary school system and all of those who have gone through that system, the nature of whether it be sexual abuse or other abuse that applied through the generations, I think we need to talk about this.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
But if the question you're asking me is about John Allen or about the others who were involved in cases similar to Louise O'Keeffe's, where the point you mentioned is correct, that there would have to be sort of prior notification and that each case was taken on its individual way, that's a different matter. So maybe you might just clarify for me what it is that you're actually asking. Is it about those cases that were parallel to Louise O'Keeffe's case? Or are you asking for an analysis of the entire primary school system over the generations?
Deputy Martin.
I don't want to accuse you of being disingenuous, but I believe you are in this case. You know full well what I'm saying, Taoiseach. It's the case that the application by the government of an interpretation of the Louise O'Keeffe judgment, the invocation of the prior complaint mechanism, which is immoral, has no moral status and I would argue no legal status. Only 7, Taoiseach, out of 360 cases have been settled via that mechanism. I'm talking about people where convictions have taken place, where the abusers are now in jail. In John Allen's case, that's exactly what has happened. Yet he's 17 years pursuing justice, Taoiseach. And they had to discontinue their cases in the courts because of threat of legal costs against them. So, by the state. So this, Taoiseach, in my view, I'm not talking about every single item or accusations, or I never said that, and you know I didn't say that. So let's not put confusion or try and create a fog around this. It's very specific, Taoiseach. And I would ask you and the Minister to engage with Professor Conor O'Mahony in UCC, who's done a lot of work on this, and who has made submissions to Europe on this. This is not complex, Taoiseach. It's quite simple. What happened after the Louise O'Keeffe judgment, seems to me, is the government said, how the hell do we limit this? How do we prevent genuine people who have been abused, whose abusers have been convicted? How do we limit the numbers? That's what's going on here, Taoiseach. And it is scandalous, Taoiseach. And in the light of the outrage, this is what gets me every now and again. We have all the outrage of 2 and 3 weeks ago. But right now, in terms of current policy, current approaches by the state, we are victimising even more those who have already been abused and, by abusers. And remember, the Louise O'Keeffe judgment was not about prior complaint.
Time is up, Deputy.
It was about the lack of proactive measures by the state to protect children in the schools, such as an inspectorial regime and so on like that. That was the essence of the Louise O'Keeffe judgment, Taoiseach. And I think it's a scandal what is now going on and the degree to which these victims have been left so high and dry, and many of them, Taoiseach, in very difficult circumstances, socially, financially and health-wise as well. It cries out for action, Taoiseach, and I'm appealing to you and the Minister for Education to engage humanely on this issue.
That and I'm glad that you're not making a political point here, in that some of these cases have gone through a number, during the period of a number of governments being in situ. I would say this about the cases of sexual abuse in day schools and primary schools. The European Court of Human Rights found that the state has liability in these cases in specific circumstances, and those circumstances were where there was a prior complaint and where the case is not statute barred. The government put in place a process to provide compensation for all victims of sexual abuse who qualify under those criteria. Hold on. Now, the government, Deputy Martin, is following the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, and the approach that the government has taken has been upheld in the Irish High Court in a recent case. I might just say to you, as aside from this, yesterday the government approved a radical reform of the court system in this country for the first in over 150 years, to be conducted by Mr Justice Kelly. Now, not all you like. You had your question. Let me just say this. In December 2014, and you're bursting with information, I know that. In December 2014, the State Claims Agency, who managed such cases on behalf of the state, was mandated to offer out-of-court settlements in current and future litigation where the circumstances of the case comes within the term of the European Court judgment and are not statute barred. And offers of 84,000 with costs have been offered by the ECA and by the SCA in a number of cases. In July of 2015, the government agreed an ex gratia payment of up to 84,000 plus a specified amount for costs be offered to those who initiated and subsequently discontinued their legal proceedings against the state, where it's established that their claims were not statute barred prior to it being discontinued, and where they can establish a prior complaint to the school authority or an earlier school authority of sexual abuse by the school employee who abused them while they were children, either in primary or post-primary schools. Survivors can submit the details to the SCA. And so where plaintiffs institute claims against the state in relation to historic child abuse, which are not statute barred and come within the terms of the Louise O'Keeffe ruling, the State Claims Agency is authorised to make settlement offers. Now, I can't comment about individual state cases, but this information may well be relevant to some of the names that you have mentioned here, and maybe not.